The auditorium smelled faintly of old wood and polish, the kind of smell that comes from years of nervous hands and proud parents. Rows of chairs were filled with families, judges, and young contestants waiting for their turn to shine. On the stage, a glossy grand piano stood quietly under the spotlight, its lid open like a waiting mouth. The hum of small talk filled the air, laughter here, whispers there, the shuffle of programs being folded and unfolded. Then the announcer's voice echoed from the microphone. Next up, contestant number 12, Eli Turner. A small boy stood up from the side row. His shirt was a little too big, the sleeves nearly covering his hands. He had a nervous smile and eyes that seemed unsure where to look. His sneakers squeaked softly as he walked across the wooden stage. Some people in the crowd tilted their heads. He looked younger than most of the other contestants, almost fragile in the light. A man in the back chuckled quietly. He looks like he just learned his ABCs. A few others smiled. "Can this kid even play?" Someone whispered. The words floated through the air, soft but sharp enough to sting. Eli didn't look up. He heard it, he always did. He'd been hearing words like that for years, ever since he told people he loved the piano. They said he was too young, too quiet, too small to understand real music. But he had learned to let the comments slide past him like raindrops. His mother always said, "Let them talk, Eli. When it's your turn, let your music answer for you." He reached the piano bench and sat down carefully. His feet barely touched the pedals. The spotlight made the back of his neck warm. He could feel the judges watching him, pens ready, faces unreadable. He placed his fingers above the keys and froze. For a moment, his mind went blank. He couldn't even remember the first note. The chatter from the audience grew louder in his head. His heart raced. He thought about running off the stage, saying he'd made a mistake, saying he wasn't ready. But then, he remembered something. The night before at home, he had played the same piece while his mother sat at the kitchen table, tired but smiling. She didn't have much time to rest. She worked long hours cleaning offices. But she always listened when he practiced. That night, when he finished, she'd said softly, "Eli, don't play for them. Play for what's inside you. Play for what you feel." He took a deep breath. His fingers pressed down on the first keys. The first few notes came out uneven, almost shaky, but then something clicked. His hands began to move more confidently, the way they always did when he forgot where he was. The sound filled the room, gentle and clear, like a stream finding its path through stones. The crowd, which had been whispering a moment ago, started to quiet down. Even the judges lifted their eyes. But before this moment, before this stage, there had been many nights when Eli almost gave up. He lived with his mother in a small apartment on the edge of town. The walls were thin and the traffic outside never stopped. His father had passed away when Eli was 6, and since then life had been about just getting by. His mother bought a used keyboard from a neighbor who was moving away. It had a few broken keys and missing buttons, but it was the best she could afford. That little keyboard became Eli's world. He didn't have a teacher. He didn't even know how to read sheet music at first. But he had an ear, a strange ability to hear something once and play it back almost perfectly. He'd sit for hours after finishing his homework, trying to copy songs he heard on the radio. Sometimes, his mother would find him asleep on the floor beside the keyboard, one hand still resting on the keys. Their neighbors complained at first, one about the noise, about that kid who won't stop playing. But after a while, even they stopped. Some nights people would pause in the hallway to listen. There was something special about the way he played, something that made you forget your day for a while. One winter evening, when the power went out during a storm, Eli lit a candle and played in the dark. His mother sat nearby with a blanket around her shoulders, and the music drifted through the apartment like warmth. "You sound like you're telling stories, Eli," she said. "You just don't use words." That's how his dream began. He wanted to play for people, not to show off, but to make them feel what he felt. The quiet joy, the sadness, the hope. The problem was nobody took him seriously. At school, when he told his classmates he loved playing piano, they laughed. "That's for rich kids," one said. Another teased, "You don't even have a real piano." He laughed along sometimes just to hide the hurt. When the school announced a regional music contest, he almost didn't sign up. The entry fee was small, but for them even small things mattered. His mother worked extra hours to cover it. "Go, Eli," she said. "It's time they hear what I hear every night." And that's how he found himself standing on that stage now, his heart pounding, his fingers trembling, and the crowd wondering if this tiny boy could even play. As his piece continued, something shifted in the room. His hands moved faster, more freely. The melody was full of emotion. It rose and fell like a heartbeat. It wasn't a famous song. It was something he had written himself. The notes told his story, the long nights, the laughter with his mother, the moments of doubt. Every sound that came from the piano felt alive. In the second row, a woman who had been whispering earlier leaned forward, her expression softening. One of the judges put down his pen. The other stopped writing completely. The auditorium that had once buzzed with chatter was now completely silent. Even the man who had laughed at the start sat still, his face unreadable. Eli didn't notice any of it. He was lost in his music. The noise in his head, the fear, the worry, the doubt, was gone. All that was left was rhythm, feeling, and the memory of his mother's voice. He could almost hear her whispering, "Play for what's inside you." When the last note rang out, it hung in the air for a long moment before fading. Then there was silence. Eli sat there, unsure what to do next. He slowly lifted his hands off the keys, expecting maybe a polite clap or two. Instead, there was a deep hush, the kind that comes before something big, and then the audience erupted in applause. People stood up. Some cheered. The same man who had laughed earlier was now clapping the loudest. The judges exchanged looks and, surprised, even moved. Eli looked out at them, stunned. For the first time he realized what he had done. The sound of the applause felt like a wave washing over him, warm and powerful. He smiled, a small, quiet smile, and gave a shy bow before walking off the stage. Backstage, his mother was waiting. She looked like she'd been holding her breath the entire time. When he walked toward her, she wrapped him in a hug so tight it almost lifted him off the ground. "You did it, Eli," she whispered. "You really did it." He didn't say much, just rested his head against her shoulder and listened to the applause still echoing from the hall. For him, that sound wasn't about winning. It was about being heard. The judges announced that the results would be posted later that evening, but Eli didn't care anymore. He had come to prove something, not to the crowd, but to himself. As they walked home through the cool night air, his mother held his hand. "See," she said softly. "I told you. Let them talk. Your music will always speak louder." Eli looked up at the stars. For the first time, he felt like he could really belong. Not because people clapped for him, but because he had finally played without fear. He didn't know it yet, but that small-town performance was only the beginning. A parent in the audience had recorded his entire piece on their phone. Later that night, they would upload it online with the caption, "This boy shocked the whole hall." And by the next morning, thousands of people would be watching it, listening to the same notes that had made an entire room go silent. But for now, Eli just smiled, holding his mother's hand, not knowing that the sound of his little piano was about to travel farther than he ever dreamed. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the curtains of the small apartment, landing softly on the old keyboard by the window. Eli woke up to the faint sound of his mother humming in the kitchen. The air smelled like toast and coffee. He stretched, blinking against the light, still half lost in the memory of the night before. For a moment, he thought it might have been a dream. The big stage, the bright lights, the sound of applause that had shaken him to his bones. But then he saw it, his contestant badge from the talent show, lying on the desk beside his notebook. And suddenly it all came back. He smiled. He didn't win a trophy or prize money. Not yet. But that moment when the crowd stood and clapped felt better than anything else could. It was the first time he had seen people go silent because of something he created. In the kitchen, his mother turned when she saw him. "Good morning, champion," she said with a grin. Eli laughed, rubbing his eyes. "Champion? I didn't even win." "You didn't need to," she said, placing a plate of toast in front of him. "You already did what most people never do. You made them listen." He sat at the table, chewing quietly while she poured him a glass of milk. She looked tired, like always, but her eyes were full of pride. She added, "You know, someone from the audience stopped me last night after you played. Said they recorded the whole thing. They might post it online." Eli almost dropped his toast. "Post it, like, on the internet?" "Maybe. she said with a smile. Who knows, right? He didn't think much of it. To him, that little show was just one small dream come true. He had no idea that a video of him was about to be seen by millions. Later that afternoon, while his mother was at work, Eli sat by the window with his keyboard. He touched the worn-out keys, some yellowed from age, one missing entirely near the middle. The sound wasn't perfect. Sometimes a note would buzz or stick, but it didn't matter. He began to play softly. Not a song this time, but just sounds, tiny fragments of emotion. He liked to do that when he didn't know what to say. As he played, he thought about how people had looked at him before he started performing, how they had laughed. He didn't blame them. He knew what he looked like on that stage. Small, nervous, unsure, but music had changed everything. It wasn't about being better than anyone else. It was about showing something real, something no one could see on the outside. That night, when his mother came home, she looked unusually excited. Eli, she said, you won't believe this. What happened? He asked. Someone posted your video from the show. It's everywhere. People are watching it. He blinked. Everywhere? She nodded. Come look. She opened her phone and showed him a short clip. The video had his name written in the caption, the little boy who made everyone cry with his piano. The video had already reached thousands of views, comments flooding in from strangers. How is he only 12? I can feel every note he plays. This kid just reminded me why I love music. Eli stared at the screen in silence. He wasn't sure how to react. It didn't feel real. Seeing people from all over the world talk about something he'd done in that little hall. Over the next few days, things changed fast. The local paper called. Then a reporter from a small TV station wanted to interview him. His mother had to borrow a shirt from her co-worker just to look decent for the camera crew that came to their apartment. The reporter asked simple questions. When did he start playing? Who taught him? How did it feel to get that standing ovation? Eli answered softly, I just like how it sounds. Music makes me feel like I can say things I can't with words. The interview aired that weekend. The video gained even more views. Hundreds of thousands now. People from other countries began sending messages. Some offered to send him a real piano. Others wanted to know when he would perform again. For the first time, Eli realized that maybe, just maybe, this could be more than a dream. But not everything was easy after that. At school, some classmates who used to laugh at him now acted differently. Some suddenly wanted to be his friends, sitting with him at lunch, asking him questions about his fame. Others whispered behind his back, saying he got lucky or that the video was exaggerated. Eli tried not to let it bother him, but deep down it did. He missed when things were simple, when it was just him. His mother and that broken keyboard. One afternoon, he stayed back in the empty music room at school. The piano there was old and slightly out of tune, but still better than the one at home. He played quietly, lost in thought until the music teacher, Mr. Holloway Wen, walked in. The man listened for a moment before saying, That's beautiful. Did you write it? Eli nodded. I was just trying something, Mr. Holloway smiled. You've got something special, Eli. You don't just play notes, you make people feel them. Have you ever thought about joining the state competition? You could win a scholarship for lessons, Eli hesitated. I don't know if I'm ready. You'll never be ready, the teacher said gently. That's the secret. You just start anyway. That night, Eli told his mother about it. She looked at him for a long moment, then said, If you want to do it, I'll find a way to pay the entry fee. We'll make it work. He didn't answer right away. He looked down at his hands, and small but steady now, and thought about how far they'd come. The next few weeks were full of practice. Every free moment, every evening after homework, he sat by that keyboard shaping melodies. Sometimes his fingers cramped, and sometimes he got frustrated when things didn't sound right, but he kept going. One night, he fell asleep with his head resting against the keyboard, and his mother quietly covered him with a blanket. She watched him for a long time, her tired face soft with pride and worry. She knew the world could be harsh, especially to dreamers. A few days before the competition, something unexpected happened. A famous pianist from another country had seen his viral video and shared it on social media, writing, This young boy reminded me what true emotion sounds like. I hope to meet him one day. That single post changed everything again. News outlets started reaching out. Music schools began offering short-term mentorships. Eli's name was now being mentioned in places far beyond his small town. But through all the noise, he stayed grounded. Every morning, he still helped his mother carry groceries. He still walked to school with his old backpack and ate lunch alone sometimes. He didn't want fame. He wanted growth. He kept reminding himself of one thing his mother always said. It's not about being seen. It's about being remembered for something real. When the day of the state competition arrived, Eli stood backstage again, smaller stage but bigger stakes. He looked around at the other contestants, some older, more confident, dressed sharply. He wore the same shirt he'd worn at the local contest, freshly ironed this time. He took a deep breath. His heart pounded, but it wasn't the same kind of fear anymore. It was excitement, the kind that comes from knowing you belong somewhere. When his name was called, he stepped onto the stage. The lights felt familiar now. The grand piano in the center gleamed under the spotlight. He sat down, touched the keys, and closed his eyes. In the audience, his mother sat in the front row, hands clasped tightly, whispering a prayer. He began to play. The first note floated out, then the next, and soon the hall filled with a melody that didn't sound like it came from a 12-year-old boy. It was deep, emotional, and full of life. A song about everything he'd been through. By the time he hit the last chord, the entire hall was silent again, that same kind of silence from before, when no one dared to breathe. Then came the sound. Applause that grew louder and louder, echoing off the walls. Eli smiled shyly and bowed. Somewhere in the back, a man recording with his phone whispered, "This kid, he's something else." And just like that, another video began its journey online, one that would take Eli's story to places he couldn't yet imagine. The next few days after the state competition felt like a blur. Eli's name was everywhere, on local news channels, music blogs, and even a few national articles. People were calling him the boy who played with his heart. But at home, nothing had really changed. The same small apartment, the same flickering kitchen light, the same second-hand keyboard that had carried all his dreams so far. Eli still woke up early for school. He still walked the same cracked sidewalks and helped his mother with chores before sitting down to practice. But there was something new in the air, a quiet buzz of hope. His mother noticed it too. Every time she looked at him, she seemed to smile a little easier. She still worked long hours, but now she carried a kind of light with her, the kind that comes from seeing your child slowly step into the world he was meant for. One evening, as Eli sat by the window trying to compose a new tune, his mother came in holding a letter. "This came for you," she said. He wiped his hands on his jeans and took it carefully. The envelope was white, with neat black letters across the front. He opened it slowly, his heart thudding. Inside was a letter from the director of a well-known music academy in the city. They had seen his performance online. They wanted to invite him to their summer program, 3 months of professional training free of charge. Eli's eyes widened. "They want me to study there?" His mother smiled, her eyes wet with pride. "Yes, sweetheart. They do." He didn't know what to say. He had never even been inside a real music school. The idea of sitting in a room full of grand pianos with real teachers felt like something from another world. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what it would be like, learning from real musicians, meeting other kids who loved the piano as much as he did. But along with excitement came fear. What if he wasn't good enough? What if the other students had more training, more skill, better instruments? Still, the next morning he told his mother, "I want to go." She hugged him tightly. "Then we'll make it happen." The academy was far from their small town. It took nearly 3 hours by bus to reach the city. On the first day, they left before sunrise. Eli wore his cleanest clothes, a simple white shirt and black pants, and carried a small bag with his notebook and sheet music. When they arrived, the building looked enormous. Glass walls, tall doors, the faint sound of instruments echoing from inside. Eli froze for a moment, staring up in awe. His mother squeezed his hand. "Go on," she whispered. "You belong here." Inside, the halls were filled with students, some carrying violins, others chatting excitedly about composers he had only read about. He found his classroom and quietly took a seat at the back. The instructor, a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes, greeted everyone warmly. "Welcome, everyone," he said. "This summer you're going to learn not just how to play music, but how to feel it." As the lesson began, Eli noticed how quickly the other students read their sheet music, how confidently they spoke about notes and tempo. He felt small again, just like the first time he'd stepped on stage. When it was his turn to play, he hesitated. The teacher smiled gently. "Take your time." Eli sat at the piano. The room went silent. He closed his eyes, took a breath, and began to play one of his own pieces, the one he had written during the rainy nights when he missed his father. When he finished, the room was completely still. The teacher nodded slowly. "That," he said, "was not something you can teach. That comes from the soul." The other students clapped softly, some even looking a little emotional. For the first time that day, Eli smiled. Maybe he did belong after all. Over the next few weeks, he worked harder than ever. He practiced until his fingers ached. He learned how to read music properly, how to compose with structure, how to mix emotion with precision. But what made him stand out wasn't how perfectly he played. It was how he made people feel something when he did. The teachers noticed it. The students noticed it too. Some of them, who at first looked down on him for being the viral kid, started asking for his help when they struggled with their own pieces. One evening, after class, the director of the academy called him to his office. "You have something rare." "Eli," he said, "you remind me of why I fell in love with music in the first place. It's not just about skill, it's about honesty." Eli looked down shyly. "Thank you, sir." The director smiled. "We have a recital at the end of the program. The best students will perform for a live audience. Parents, teachers, even sponsors." "I'd like you to play." Eli's heart raced. "Me?" "Yes, you. Think of it as your next step." When he told his mother that night over the phone, she almost cried with joy. "Oh, Eli," she said, "I wish your father could see this." He swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "I think he knows, Mom." As the recital drew closer, the pressure grew. The other students practiced for hours. Eli did too, staying behind even after everyone had gone home. Some nights, the janitor would find him still sitting at the piano, eyes closed, fingers moving as if they were chasing something invisible. He decided to play a new piece, one he hadn't shared with anyone yet. It was something he had been working on since the day his first video went viral. It told his whole story, the laughter, the doubt, the long nights, and the hope that kept him going. On the day of the recital, the hall was packed. Parents in formal clothes, teachers chatting quietly, flashes of cameras here and there. Eli sat backstage, clutching his sheet music, though he knew the entire piece by heart. When his name was called, his legs felt weak. He stepped out into the light. The grand piano sat in the middle of the stage, shining like glass under the spotlight. He sat down, adjusted the bench, and looked out at the audience. He couldn't see his mother, she was sitting far back, but he knew she was there. He took a deep breath. Then he began to play. The first note was soft, almost fragile. The next one followed, and then another, weaving into a melody that filled the hall like light. His fingers moved faster, smoother, the story unfolding through sound. In those few minutes, Eli wasn't just playing, he was remembering. Every hardship, every night his mother stayed up working, every laugh that turned into tears. It all became part of the music. By the time he reached the final note, the audience was completely still, and then, slowly, people began to stand. The applause grew louder and louder until it filled the entire hall. The director smiled proudly from the front row. The other students were clapping too, some wiping their eyes. Eli stood, bowed slightly, and smiled. When he walked off stage, his mother was waiting with open arms. She hugged him tightly, whispering, "You did it again, Eli. You made them feel something real." That night, after they returned home, Eli sat by his old keyboard once more. It looked even smaller now, more fragile than before, but it still carried that same magic. He placed his fingers on the keys and played quietly. The sound wasn't perfect, it never was, but it was honest. And in that small apartment with his mother dozing off nearby, the music filled the room like warmth. He didn't know what was coming next, and the offers, the interviews, the chance to travel and perform in places he'd only seen on TV. But he knew one thing for sure. He would never stop playing. Because for Eli, music wasn't about fame or applause. It was about truth, the kind you couldn't put into words, the kind that lived quietly between every note. And as the last sound faded into the night, he smiled to himself, knowing that somewhere out there, someone might be listening and feeling just like he once did. When the summer program ended, Eli's life began to change faster than he could keep up with. The recital video from the academy was posted online, and within days it spread across social media. People called it the performance that made the world stop for 5 minutes. Even musicians from other countries shared it. Some said his music reminded them of when they first fell in love with the piano. Others wrote long comments about how his melody helped them through hard days. Eli didn't really understand how big it was until his mother showed him one evening. They were sitting together at the kitchen table when she said, "Eli, you need to see this." She opened her laptop and turned the screen toward him. There it was, millions of views, comments in different languages, news articles calling him the boy who plays with his heart. Eli stared quietly. "Millions?" he whispered. His mother smiled, brushing his hair back. "Millions, my love. The world heard you." He didn't know how to feel. It was exciting, yes, but also strange. For years it had just been him and his old keyboard in that small apartment. Now people he'd never met were calling him a prodigy. He didn't think of himself that way. He just played what he felt. But the world had other plans for him now. A few weeks later, an email arrived from a large concert organization in Europe. They had seen his video and wanted him to perform as a guest in a charity concert that featured young talents from around the world. When he told his mother, she covered her mouth in disbelief. "Eli, that's huge. They're inviting you." He nodded slowly. "But it's so far." "And the ticket?" She shook her head. "Don't you worry about that. We'll find a way." They didn't have much, but when people heard about the invitation, the community came together. Eli's school started a fundraiser. His teacher, Mr. Holloway, even organized a small local concert to help with travel costs. By the time the trip came, everything was ready. The morning of the flight, Eli wore a plain white shirt and carried a small backpack with his music sheets and his lucky charm, a tiny wooden keychain shaped like a piano, which his mother had given him when he first started playing. At the airport, his mother hugged him tightly. "Remember," she whispered, "no matter how big the stage is, just play from your heart. That's what got you here." He nodded, fighting back tears. "I'll make you proud, Mom." She smiled. "You already have." The flight was long, and Eli spent most of it staring out the window, watching the clouds drift by. He imagined what the concert hall would look like, how it would feel to sit at a piano so grand that the sound could fill an entire room. When he finally arrived, he couldn't believe his eyes. The concert venue was enormous. Golden walls, crystal chandeliers, rows upon rows of velvet seats. It looked like a palace built for music. Backstage, he met other young musicians, violinists, singers, pianists from all over the world. They were older, dressed neatly, speaking with confidence. Some smiled at him kindly, while others gave curious looks, whispering to each other. Eli didn't mind. He was used to that look, the one that said he's too small to make a difference. The rehearsal went well, though Eli barely spoke. He was too busy feeling everything. The sound of footsteps echoing across the stage, the weight of the grand piano keys, the soft rustle of programs being handed out to the audience. When the day of the concert finally came, he stood backstage clutching his small notebook. He could hear the applause for the performer before him, a teenage violinist whose skill was breathtaking. And then, his name was announced. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our youngest performer tonight, Eli Turner." The spotlight followed him as he walked slowly across the stage. The piano gleamed under the lights. He took his seat, adjusted the bench, and for a moment everything went silent. Eli looked down at the keys. His fingers hovered above them, trembling slightly. He remembered the same fear from that first small-town competition. The laughter, the doubt, the uncertainty. Then he remembered his mother's voice. "Play from your heart." He took a deep breath and began. The first few notes were soft, almost whisper-like. The melody grew, rising like a quiet storm, filling the hall with warmth and emotion. His hands moved with a kind of freedom that made it seem like the piano itself was breathing with him. Every note carried a piece of his story, the nights of practice, the sound of rain on their apartment window, the love that had kept him going when things were hard. The audience didn't move. No one even coughed. When the last note faded, there was a heartbeat of silence, and then the entire hall stood up. The applause was thunderous, the kind that echoed through every wall and every heart. Eli stood, his face flushed, and bowed deeply. Backstage, he could barely process what had happened. People were coming up to him, other musicians, organizers, even journalists, all wanting to shake his hand or tell him how moved they were. One older pianist, who had performed before him, placed a hand on Eli's shoulder and said softly, "You reminded me why I started playing. Never lose that feeling." That night after the concert, Eli went back to his hotel room. It was quiet except for the city lights flickering outside the window. He called his mother right away. When she answered, her voice was full of excitement. "I saw it online. Oh, Eli, the whole crowd stood up for you." He smiled, staring out at the skyline. "They did, Mom, they really did." "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Your father would be too." He didn't say anything for a while. He just listened to her breathing on the other end, feeling both full and empty at the same time. That night before sleeping, he opened his notebook and wrote something down. It's not about how many people listen. It's about how deeply they feel. When he returned home, everything felt the same, but nothing really was. People recognized him on the street sometimes. Reporters wanted interviews. He was invited to perform at more events. But through it all, Eli stayed the same quiet boy who loved the sound of the keys more than the sound of applause. He still practiced on his old keyboard. It still buzzed on certain notes, and one of the black keys was still missing, but he refused to replace it. It reminded him of where he came from. Sometimes his mother would sit beside him and hum while he played. Other times she'd fall asleep on the couch and he'd lower the volume just to keep the room peaceful. Months passed and Eli's story continued to spread. Music teachers used his performances to inspire their students. Schools shared his videos as examples of passion over perfection. But with fame also came pressure. Expectations grew. Every new performance had to be better than the last. Every mistake felt heavier. One evening, after a long practice, he stopped suddenly. His hands hovered over the keys and he just sat there staring at them. He realized he hadn't played for himself in weeks. He'd been trying to please everyone else, the audience, the critics, the sponsors. He stood up, walked to the window, and watched the rain fall outside. It reminded him of the nights when music had been just him and his thoughts. No lights, no noise, no stage. He went back to the keyboard, closed his eyes, and played something soft, something that no one else had heard before. It wasn't for a show. It wasn't for a video. It was for the little boy who once sat in this same room dreaming. The melody filled the apartment, gentle and real. His mother, hearing it from the kitchen, leaned against the doorway and smiled quietly. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She could tell from the sound that her son had found himself again. And when the last note faded, Eli looked up at her and said softly, "Mom, I think I finally understand. It's not about how big the stage is. It's about who you play for." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Exactly, my love. That's what I've been trying to tell you all along." That night, the world outside was quiet. But in that little apartment, the music never stopped. It was no longer just a dream. It was his life. And though the world would soon call him a genius, a prodigy, or a legend in the making, to his mother and to himself, he would always just be the boy who played from the heart.